Hey y'all, this is Curtis Grimes, and I want to give a shout out and a special thank you to everyone associated with TNCRadio.LIVE.
Welcome to TNCRadio.LIVE. This is Truckers Life Radio. This show is brought to you by TFC Global, a Christian ministry to the trucking community dedicated to reaching, supporting, and encouraging professional drivers. And now here's your host, Ron Frazier.
Welcome to Truckers Life Radio on TNCRadio.LIVE. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, we are a radio program that is dedicated to helping drivers on life's highway. As we begin our program, we want to encourage you, as always, to contact us at truckerslife@tncradio.live should you have any questions or even possibly a story of your own that you'd like to share with us. On today's program, we're happy to have Ellen Voie, who is the president, CEO, and founder of Women in Trucking. Ellen, thank you for joining us today. We're glad to have you with us.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, Ron. I appreciate it.
So, Ellen, here's a $6 million question. Who is Ellen Voie? And I mean, who are you personally? Tell us some of your story, your background.
Well, I'm going to go way back, Ron. I'm going to go back to growing up in a small town in central Wisconsin, a very Norwegian community. My parents were only third generation in the United States, and their families are still in Norway. I have lots of relatives in Norway. So very small community. My dad and grandpa and uncle and other uncle owned the funeral home. I come from a long family of undertakers. And so, you know, when you grow up in a small town, everybody knows everybody. And I was the second oldest of 5 children. And I have a sister who's a year and a half younger than me. And in the 70s, you know, girls didn't have the same opportunities as boys. And my mom always said, you can do anything you want. You can do it. And so she encouraged us and to be in sports and to be active. And so I wanted to take industrial arts class instead of home economics, because my mom could teach me how to cook and clean and wash clothes, but I wanted to know woodworking and welding and drafting and all that kind of stuff. And so I took shop class and learned welding and drafting. In fact, the instructor always said that I was the best welder he ever had. And so after high school, I actually went to school for radio broadcasting for a while and ended up being a DJ in Ohio for a while and learning that disc jockeys don't make all that much money. But my mom ended up getting ill in 1978, and she got Lou Gehrig's disease. And so I moved back home, and I got a job at a steel fabricating plant drafting material handling equipment. And my mom passed away a few months later. And when I left my job, I thought I would never come back. But when I came back after the funeral, the owner of the company came to me and said, we would like to move you into the traffic department and we will pay for you to go to school. So they sent me to school for traffic and transportation management and made me the assistant traffic manager. And then when my boss left, I was promoted to traffic manager. And by this time I was like 20 years old. And I was responsible for all the incoming raw steel and all the outgoing material handling equipment, which would go by truck or rail, sometimes even air cargo. And we had 3 plants of our own and 3 trucks. So I was responsible for the all of the transportation. And so it was quite a learning experience. It was actually before deregulation, but it was hard. And people didn't expect to see a young female as traffic manager. So it was quite a challenge, but I loved it. And that's how I got in the trucking industry. And here I am, you know, many years later, still loving the trucking industry.
Ellen, I understand that you had gotten your CDL. Did you actually drive a truck, or is that something you just felt you needed to do? How did your acquiring a CDL fit into all of this?
Well, when I started Women in Trucking, we had carriers who joined, schools who joined, and one of the schools, they said, Ellen, you should get your CDL so that you understand the experience. And so I went to Tri-C, Cuyahoga Community College in Cleveland, and wrote a book about it. And it's called Crushing Cones. But the book is about my experience going through school, like what skills are needed? How do you choose a good school? What are the shifting patterns? I had a great experience. And so that was in 2008 when I got my CDL. So really, I don't drive for a living, Ron, but I did it just so that I could experience it and better understand what drivers go through to obtain a CDL.
Ellen, you have such a zeal for the trucking industry, and obviously, you seem to have a zeal for anything you do, but especially for the trucking industry. How did you bring that into women in trucking? I mean, what motivated you to stick with this when you weren't making money in the first 2 years?
Well, the first thing is, I have a zeal for life, Ron, I think because my mom died at the age of 46. And so when I was I was 20, and figured I have to fast forward life because I don't know how long I'm going to live. And so I just felt like, okay, I'm not going to waste any time. I'm just going to enjoy life, experience life, and do what I can in what I thought was a short amount of time. And I think that's pretty common when someone loses a parent at a young age. They think their time is limited as well. And the second thing is, I've learned that trucking isn't about trucks. It's not about freight. It's not about shipping. It's about people. And I love the people side of the trucking industry. And so, that's what's motivated me at Women in Trucking. It's like, how can we empower these women in whether they're in the boardroom or, in the C-suite or in the cab of a truck or in the shop? How do we empower them? How do we, tell them that they can do this and that this is a job that they can be great at and make a good living? And so it's really about the people, and that's where my passion lies.
Is that where the comment or the statement came out that you're not for, that you are not for women, you are about women?
Yeah, because everything we do isn't just for women. It's about the industry. And so when I say that, I mean, when we do things like work with the truck stops on safety and security, or the showers at TA Petros, they're putting in big shower heads and hair dryers and fluffy towels. That's not just for women. It's for everyone. And so when I say we're about women, it's really that a lot of the things we do are through a filter of gender and diversity. So yeah, we're not just for women, but we are about women. So we want to make the environment much more conducive to bringing more women into this industry.
So let me ask you this. In looking at the driving culture as it is today, and obviously we know from the past that the culture has changed radically as far as the different nationalities who are now professional drivers. And I'm assuming you're seeing that in the women as well, that you're getting different nationalities coming into the trucking industry, women coming into the trucking industry. Is that the case?
Absolutely. In fact, we do an event every year at the Mid-America Trucking Show called the Salute to Women Behind the Wheel. And the first year we had probably, maybe a dozen African-American women, and they started hugging each other. They didn't see enough of themselves out on the road. And so they formed a bond. And just this past week, Ron, NBC Latino interviewed our drivers, our Latina drivers, and because they wanted to show that, Latina women are capable of doing this as well. So you have to see people who look like you doing that job before you start thinking about it. And so we have to share their stories.
Well, and I can see how being in the trucking industry, and most people understand that it's a lonely situation for many because they're on the road 3 weeks out of the month, how not seeing somebody on the road can make you feel all alone. So we talked about image, and I know that in light of all that's going on with the tracking issue, My question becomes, do you think the image of the trucking industry has gotten worse, and that makes it more difficult for women because they see all the stresses that are going on right now?
Well, I really agree. Someone once said that the advent of the CB radio, the prevalence of the CB radio kind of affected this industry. And I think that's true. It used to be drivers were the knights of the road, and you were always told if your car breaks down, and a truck driver stops, they're there to help you. Well, now, first of all, truck drivers don't have the time to stop. But secondly, people don't feel safe if somebody is stopping to help them. And the drivers themselves don't feel safe stopping to help a stranded motorist because they don't know what's going to happen. So I think maybe it's not just the trucking industry, Ron. Maybe it's just the way things are in the world that we just don't trust each other and we don't feel safe like we did 20, 30 years ago.
And that's a good point. When we come back, Ellen, I want to talk to you a little bit, get more into women in trucking. But we've got to go to a break. So you are listening to Truckers Life Radio and TNCRadio.LIVE, and we will be back in a minute with Ellen Voie.
This blog is brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net. 4 simple ways to improve your physical health as a truck driver. Being a truck driver is a rewarding career. However, it's not very rewarding for your physical health. A truck driver's lifestyle makes it difficult for them to be healthy. Because of their lifestyle, truckers are more likely to develop serious health issues like obesity, high blood pressure, diabetes, and more. Although a truck driver's lifestyle doesn't promote healthy living, it doesn't mean that a truck driver cannot be healthy while on the road. There are several ways you can improve your health on the road. Here are 4 things you can start doing today to improve your physical health on the road as a truck driver. Avoid harmful foods. Avoiding unhealthy foods is way harder than it sounds. As a truck driver, your healthy food choices are extremely limited. While it may seem impossible to completely cut out unhealthy foods from your diet, it might be a good idea to cut back. You can start cutting back on unhealthy foods by packing meals in your truck. That way, the next time you get hungry on the road, you can eat a much healthier meal instead of eating greasy, high-calorie fast food. Another way you can start cutting back on unhealthy foods is to make a list of unhealthy items you eat every day and start slowly replacing them with a healthier option. For example, if you drink soda 3 times a day, cut back to 2, then to 1, and then none. Stock up on healthy foods. To live a healthier lifestyle, you have to cut back on heavily processed foods. Unfortunately, a truck driver's diet heavily consists of processed foods. Stocking up on healthy groceries is one of the best ways you can improve your physical health. When grocery shopping before your trip, avoid frozen pre-made meals, sodas, fried foods, chips. Instead, look for whole grain, fruits, veggies, and healthy fats. Start exercising. Exercise is essential to a driver's overall physical and mental health. Truck drivers have to get creative to stay fit while on the road. Finding the time to exercise can be a challenge for truck drivers. Drivers spend up to 11 hours a day on the road. After working all day, exercising may seem like the last thing you want to do, but you'll thank yourself later. Exercising a few times a week will not only improve your physical health, but also mental health. Get a good night's rest. The right amount of sleep is crucial for a truck driver. Lack of sleep can make driving dangerous. A study shows that long-haul truck drivers obtain less sleep than the required amount of alertness on the job. Truckers need a good night's sleep to be fully alert and ready to take on the road the next morning. Truck drivers travel several hundred miles each day. To reach their destination on time, they'll have to prioritize sleep so they can be alert and ready to take on the day. Not only is sleep an important factor for job performance, but it's also important for lowering stress levels and improving your immune system. Now here are some ways to promote better sleep. Turn off electronics an hour before bed. Invest in a good mattress and pillow. Put up curtains in your truck cab. Avoid caffeine before bed. And exercise. This blog was brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net.
Hi, this is Bill Walter. Want to learn more about trains? Join us Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central for The Train Station. It's right here on TNCRadio.LIVE.
Welcome back. You're listening to Truckers Life Radio right here on TNCRadio.LIVE. And now here's your host, Ron Frazier.
Our guest today is Ellen Voie. Ellen, I want to talk to you a little bit about what is Women in Trucking really all about? What is it that you do and what is it you're trying to accomplish?
Well, let me go back to when I got the idea for Women in Trucking. I was working at a large carrier in Green Bay, and they said, figure out how to attract and retain non-traditional groups. And that included returning military, Hispanics, seniors, and women. And they were very forward thinking because at that time, a lot of companies said, oh, well, we don't care the age or the gender or the ethnicity of who we're hiring. We just want a good driver. Well, I worked for Schneider and they said, no, let's look at these groups and think about, what are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? And so I started doing my research on women as drivers. And the number one concern that female drivers have is safety. They want to feel safe. And I thought, oh, we had our own operating centers, which were fenced in, and we had security guards, and we had our own laundry and delis and showers and, fitness centers. And I thought, well, why aren't we really pushing the fact that this is a very safe environment? And the equipment was well maintained. So, and at the time, I was getting my pilot's license and I belonged to a women's aviation organization. And so it struck me that, wow, we have an organization for female pilots, but we don't have one for female truck drivers. And so I talked to a number of people and put together a board of directors of women who all believed in, the trying to grow the percentage of women in the industry. And we had our first meeting in March of 2007. And we wrote our mission statement, and the mission has never changed. It's threefold. It's to encourage the employment of women in the trucking industry, to address obstacles that might keep women from entering or succeeding in the trucking industry, and to celebrate the success of women employed in the industry. So those three parts of our mission have always been the same. And here we are almost 15 years later. And we grew to 500 members the very first year. And we now have over 6,000 members in 10 countries. So people have changed their attitudes and said, oh, well, we do care about who we're putting in our trucks. And we know that women are safer drivers. So our message is getting out there loud and clear that women are very capable and are wanted and valued in the trucking industry.
Ellen, you say, and I've heard you say it before, your organization is not for women. You are about women. Now, I'm not really sure that I've ever totally grasped the understanding of that. So what do you mean by that?
Well, about 15% of our members are men, and they join because they believe in our mission. And so if it was for women, we would only try to change the trucking industry just focusing on women's issues. But that's not the case. Everything we do helps everyone. So like we work with the truck stops on safety and security and amenities, and they've put in big shower heads and hair dryers and big fluffy towels. And guess what? Men like those amenities as well. And when we talk about safety and security at, locations, men want safety and security. And we work with the truck cab manufacturers on truck cab design and ergonomics. And we want a truck that's more adaptable for women who have typically shorter arms and legs. And guess what? There's a lot of men out there who might not be, the 6 foot, driver. There's men out there who are 5'8" as well, or 5'6". And so everything we're doing helps the industry as a whole, and not just for women. So that's what I meant by that, Ron. And I do need to stress that we're not just about truck drivers either. We represent, I like to say, the women who design the trucks and build the trucks and sell the trucks and fix the trucks and drive the trucks and own the trucks. So we represent all women in the trucking industry.
So if I hear you correctly, Ellen, you're talking about not only encouraging women to get involved in becoming professional drivers, but you're encouraging women to get involved in all aspects of the trucking industry, which would include ownership, which would include working as a dispatcher. Is that the reality here?
Absolutely. In fact, we also, in addition to the Women in Trucking Association, which is what we call 501c6, which is a trade professional organization. So people pay dues to join. But we also have a sister organization called the Women in Trucking Scholarship Foundation. And that is a charitable organization, which is a 501c3. And we provide scholarships to women looking at careers in trucking. And the scholarships are in 4 areas. Commercial driver's license, of course, but also safety. We help women advance their careers if they're looking in the area of being like a safety director or working in the area of safety. And the third one is technicians. We need technicians, diesel technicians badly. Women only make up 2% of diesel technicians. And then the fourth area of scholarships is about, we loosely define it as leadership. So if there's a woman working in the industry and she wants to advance her career at her company, whether it's a warehouse or a trucking company or a logistics company, we help them with their tuition. So we do help women in all different areas.
Ellen, I've heard you say life begins at the edge of your comfort zone. And you have a motorcycle license, you have a pilot's license, you have a CDL, but not every woman is Ellen Voie. And so, and maybe that's too bad, I don't know. But my question to you is, do women actually see the trucking industry as a viable option for them when it comes to a career, and why or why not? Not everybody is on that cutting edge of I'm willing to jump out of an airplane mindset.
Well, it's because women don't see other women often enough doing the job. So that's one of the things we do when I say we celebrate success. We tell stories. We have a member of the month. We have a driver of the year. We have an image team that does ride-alongs and media interviews. And lately, the media has been calling us constantly. We were just on CBS and NBC last week, and a media outlet in Texas went for a ride with one of our drivers because the supply chain has been in the news. But when we get our female drivers out there talking about what they do, other women look at them and say, oh, well, if she can do it, I can do it. So we have to get that message out there. We had a driver on the Megyn Kelly show over a year ago before it went off the air. And when she talked about how she loves the sunsets, I think she drives in the evening, and she talked about how much she loves about her job. And our phones just lit up and emails came pouring in, and women said, I hadn't thought about it. And so we just have to get our drivers out there. And we've also, 2 things that I'm really proud of, Ron. We found out that Boy Scouts had a transportation patch and the Girl Scouts didn't. So we created one with the greater Chicago, Northern Indiana region and wrote the curriculum. And so we've created the Girl Scout transportation patch, and over 1,000 girls have earned that in supply chain. And it has an activity book that goes with it, and it's called Scouting for Cookies. And it talks about how the grain from the field goes to the bakery in a truck and onto packaging and warehousing. And it talks about the importance of the trucking industry to the Girl Scouts. So we have to make it real.
That's amazing. Well, Ellen, we need to go to break. But when we come back, I want to talk about some of the struggles you have faced in developing women in trucking. But for now, you are listening to Truckers Life Radio on TNCRadio.LIVE. We're going to break, but we'll be right back.
This infoblog on TNCRadio.LIVE is brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net. ISS score for truck drivers explained and how to find it. An inspection selection system score is called ISS score, was created by the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, FMCSA, to help law enforcement officers determine if the truck should be inspected. The inspection selection system score is frequently used to determine if your truck will receive a bypass command or not. There is often confusion between the ISS score and the CSA score. While there's a correlation between the two, they're not the same thing. The CSA score identifies high-risk motor carriers. The score is based on the performance data of the driver. The ISS score uses a combination of different CSA categories known as Behavior Analysis and Safety Improvement Category. that's basics for short, to determine the carrier's overall inspection rating from 0 to 100. Similar to the CSA score, the lower, the better. What determines your ISS inspection value? Unsafe driving, hours of service, HOS, driver fitness, controlled substances and alcohol, vehicle maintenance and cargo, hazardous material. There are 3 different ISS ratings categories: inspect, optional, or pass. Inspect, 75 to 100. Optional, 50 to 74. Pass, 1 to 49. ISS scores can determine how often you'll get inspected. Although some roadside inspections are at random times, most will be as a result of a higher ISS score. How to find ISS score. The FMCSA has an online portal where carriers can log in to check their ISS scores. You'll log in using your DOT-issued PIN. From there, you'll see the company information section on the main screen. Next, click the blue button labeled Inspection Selection System Info. This info blog was brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net.
Be sure to catch the Truckers Network radio show with your host, Shelley Johnson, weekdays at 3 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Eastern, right here on TNCRadio.LIVE.
Welcome back to Truckers Life Radio with Ron Fraser, right here on TNCRadio.LIVE.
We're talking with Ellen Voie. Ellen, I want to talk to you about some of the most difficult struggles you have faced in launching Women in Trucking. What are some of the things that were obstacles that you had to overcome to get this thing off the ground?
Well, I'll tell you what, I was working at Schneider when I had the idea for Women in Trucking. And so I still had a job. But I called a friend of mine who had worked for me in a previous organization. And I said, I have this idea for a Women in Trucking, and I'd like you to work for me, and I'll pay you well, but I can't pay you for a while. And she believed in me, and she still works for me. Her name's Star Pingle. And so she was doing all the organizing. She would take the phone calls, send out, she'd do the newsletter. She'd send out membership letters and things like that. Well, so I kept working at Schneider. And after about, I started Women in Trucking in March of 2007. So it was about that October. And remember what happened? We hit a recession. And not only were we letting drivers go, we weren't hiring. And my job was manager of recruiting and retention programs. And so one day, along with about 300 people, we were let go. And I had I had a daughter in college. We had a rental that she had in college. I had my house, my mortgage. And suddenly I had a job at Women in Trucking, but I had no income. And that was huge. I really had to rely on God to guide me on whether I could sustain Women in Trucking. And so I did a bunch of freelance jobs so that I could, make sure that I could support myself and my daughter. And my son was already grown by that time. So it was quite a struggle, but I got a good severance package. And so I said, all right, if I can make it, by the time my severance ends, then Women in Trucking will be a go. And if not, there won't be a Women in Trucking. And so our first year we hit 500 members, and I didn't get paid the first couple of years at Women in Trucking, but I did enough writing and freelance work to keep me, afloat. And I did eventually get to pay Shar. She was sitting on 9 months worth of paychecks, and I'd say, well, you can cash this one, but don't cash the rest. But it really was a leap of faith. And so that was, starting a nonprofit in the middle of a recession is not, I would not advise anyone to do that.
I guess not.
But we did it, Ron. And that was my goal, 500 members the first year. And we did. And the board was very supportive. And so we just kept moving forward and just saying, we know that there's a place for diversity and inclusion. And we know that the industry needs, more women at all levels. And so we just kept moving forward. And eventually things have picked up, and we've been blessed unbelievably in the almost 15 years.
Well, Ellen, God is faithful, and you're still here. You did say just a few seconds ago that you need more women, which kind of leads me to my next question. What is the ratio of women to men in the trucking industry today, say, as compared to 5 or 10 years ago?
Well, we did a study with FreightWaves about a year and a half ago, and about 900 trucking companies responded. And so over-the-road drivers make up about 10%, just under 10%. I mean, women make up just under 10% of all over-the-road drivers. If you look at the Department of Labor data, they include what they call delivery and sales drivers, which means a small truck delivering chips to a grocery store. And so we wanted to know what percentage of over-the-road drivers were women. And so it's just under 10%, but it's growing. And I mean, I've heard the ATA say that 15 years ago, we were at 3%. And so I like to tell people, well, I'd like to take credit for increasing the percentage of female drivers from 3% to 10%. Okay, I will. I'll take it.
No pride there. That's all right. Ellen, tell me, do you see the culture of the trucking industry changing in favor of women?
Well, we still have a ways to go, and that's the double-edged sword about women in trucking. I want to bring more women in, but we also need to make the workplace a better work environment. We did a best practices survey a couple years ago, and on a scale of 1 to 10, we asked female drivers, how safe they felt, and the response was 4.4. And so I stand up in front of executives and I'll say, well, if you only felt safe less than half of the time that when you go to work, would you want to work in that environment? And they say no. And recently we did a survey just a few weeks ago, and we asked women where they feel least safe. And it's truck stops and rest areas. And so we need to make the industry a safer place, because women shouldn't have to fear for their safety when they're doing a job. So whether that means putting alarm systems in the tractor trailers or in the tractors, or more safety and security at rest areas and truck stops, I don't know, but we have a long ways to go to make the environment safer so that we can tell women coming to this industry that we can ensure that they will be safe.
Ellen, I had a talk with Doug Smith the other day from Covenant, and they were talking about the idea of having their drivers stay at hotels and hotel rooms. That's kind of the progression they're doing, as opposed to sleeping in the rig. Is that part of the issue of helping drivers women and even men feel safer in the industry?
Absolutely. In fact, to me, that's a best practice. There's another trucking company that has only day cabs, and they run 49 states, and their drivers sleep in hotels. And we recently profiled one of their female drivers, and not only does the driver feel safer, but the driver gets more restful sleep being in a vehicle or being in a hotel room, as opposed to a vehicle that might have to be running to keep them warm or cool. But also it's more secure in a hotel room than it is in the cab of a truck, and they get their own shower, they get their own bathroom, and a lot of times they get meals in the morning, and they get a fitness center as well. And so to me, having drivers stay in a hotel room is truly a best practice for both men and women, but especially for making sure that women don't have to share a cab with a male trainer or team driver, which to me is not a best practice.
I'm not bringing up the negative side of that, but I'm sure the NATSO people would not be real happy about all that, because their whole livelihood as truck stop owners is getting these drivers into the truck stops. And as you and I both know, truck stops are changing. The trucking industry is struggling to put drivers on the road. How do you see all of that working together? And how has the pandemic, have you found the pandemic to have an impact on your efforts in getting women into the trucking industry?
Absolutely. Two things that you asked me. One of them, we have worked with the truck stops and we have talked to them about security and safety for our female drivers. And one of the things that a lot of female drivers do is they will shower and eat and fuel at one truck stop and then go to another one to sleep so that no one knows there's a solo female in there. And the truck stops obviously don't like that, because when they go to that final where they're sleeping, they're not buying anything. And so the truck stops would rather that they stay and shower and eat and fuel and then stay the night. But if women are afraid of letting someone see them get in the cab of their truck, then we have an issue. In regard to the pandemic, Ron, it's actually brought more women into the industry because they've lost their jobs. A lot of women weren't able to keep their jobs because of the pandemic, and so they're seeing that the supply chain. We have jobs, and they're not going away.
Well, let's pick that up in a minute. We've got to go to the break again. You're listening to Truckers Life Radio on TNCRadio.LIVE, and we'll be right back.
This blog on TNCRadio.LIVE is brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net. 5 best scenic drives for truck drivers. One of the many benefits of being a truck driver is traveling the beautiful United States. Truck drivers spend their life on the road. Although they may get tired of driving, there's still routes and attractions most look forward to seeing. Whether it be cruising down the coast of California, driving in the Smoky Mountains, or passing through the Arizona desert, truck drivers all have their personal favorites. Here are the 5 most beautiful scenic drives rated by truck drivers. Pacific Coast Highway. The Pacific Coast in California, also called Highway 1, is one of the most iconic scenic drives in the United States. Driving along the Pacific Coast reminds you of a movie or TV show. It's about 650 miles long and runs from Capistrano Beach in Orange County to Leggett in northern Mendocino. San Juan Skyway. San Juan Skyway, a scenic byway in Colorado, is known for its million-dollar views. The byway goes across the San Juan National Forest and has provided truckers with beautiful views of the mountains and landscape. Beartooth Highway. Beartooth Highway in Montana is a 68-mile byway that runs through southwest Montana and northwest Wyoming and goes into Yellowstone National Park. Along this drive, you'll see one of the most diverse ecosystems accessible by vehicle in the United States. Keep in mind that the scenic highway closes in the winter due to adverse winter conditions and typically opens up on Memorial Day weekend. I-64 in West Virginia. West Virginia has some of the most beautiful landscapes on the East Coast. Driving down I-64 in West Virginia feels like you're in a painting. If you have time to stop along your truck route, check out Tamarack, located just off I-64 in Beckley, West Virginia. Tamarack is a unique culture center with art from local artisans and delicious food. If you want the full Appalachian experience, check out Tamarack. Utah's Route 12. Utah's Route 12 is one of the most scenic routes in the United States. It's often called the All-American Road. Also, there are 2 national parks at each end of the road, Bryce Canyon and Capitol Reef, and many other unique scenic views. This info blog was brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net.
Join Shelley Johnson and Kathy Tuccaro every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Central Time for Women Road Warriors on your driver navigation station, TNCRadio.LIVE.
Welcome back. You're listening to Truckers Life Radio right here on TNCRadio.LIVE.
This is Truckers Life Radio. I'm Ron Fraser, your host. We're here with Ellen Voie. Ellen, I want to pick up where we left off somewhat. I know that you explained how the pandemic has brought more women into the trucking industry. Let me ask you this, and this is the big question everybody's asking. Do you see what's happening in this industry as an issue of a driver shortage or driver turnover? And how has that impacted women in trucking today, or women in the trucking industry today?
Well, I agree with you. We have a need for drivers, but it's because drivers are leaving. And a lot of drivers are leaving because they're just tired of having to deal with the pandemic and not being able to use restrooms in warehouses and the PPE, the equipment and the threat of catching COVID. So a lot of drivers are leaving because they're just retiring, and we have an aging driver population. But as far as women, a lot of jobs that women had didn't allow for telecommuting. If you work in a restaurant, and restaurants shut down, and if you worked in, the entertainment industry, like in, conventions or concert area, those shut down. And so a lot of women didn't have a source of income, and then they'd see how important the supply chain was. We started showing the rest of the world that toilet paper doesn't end up on a grocery store shelf by itself. And the same thing with, the hand sanitizers and things like that. And so people started seeing that the trucking industry had jobs, and we were treating our drivers with respect, at least more respect during, initial stages of COVID, because they started realizing that there was a connection to them and that truck on the road. I don't know if that has been sustained. I think the issue at the ports has also shown people that you might not get your Christmas gifts because, it can't be delivered because of the supply chain issues. But I do agree, we don't do a good enough job of keeping our drivers. And here's some data, Ron. We found that 83% of women who come into the trucking industry as drivers do so at the urging of a family member or friend. And so typically that's a husband or boyfriend, and they'll say, hey, the kids are grown, why don't you get your CDL and come out on the road with me? And I hear that over and over again. So women who come into the industry already know what the lifestyle is like. They know about being away from home. They know about being in the cab of a truck, they sleeping in a truck and things like that. So they're familiar with it. But I think the biggest disconnect is when someone sees an ad, hey, get your CDL and you'll make $48,000 your first year, and they don't have a clue what the lifestyle is like, and we're not selling it to them well enough. And so that's where all that churn is. I mean, the data is staggering. I mean, over 100% turnover at some of the large companies, and the turnover in the first 3 months is unbelievable. So we aren't doing a good enough job addressing that. But I will tell you one thing that we're doing at Women in Trucking. We started a new mentoring program called Lead Her Trucking. And we took 12 new drivers who had been in the industry less than a year and 12 seasoned drivers to mentor them. And it's a 10-month commitment, no cost to them. And so they call in once a month, and they have a speaker talk about things like nutrition or finances or, different subjects every month. And then they have someone they can lean on. And of the 12 who started, we've already lost one, and 2 are on the verge of leaving because they just can't handle the lifestyle. So either we need to change the lifestyle, which is what I hope we do, or we need to make sure that we better prepare drivers to handle this lifestyle.
Okay, so let's talk about that for a minute. You're talking about you either need to change the lifestyle. How is Women in Trucking helping to level the playing field for women in the trucking industry? If their lifestyle is what it is, and women aren't staying because of it, and you guys are such an advocacy for the women in trucking, how are you trying to level the playing field for women?
Well, really, it's about getting the word out that you don't have to be over the road. So many people just think that you have to go to the big mega carriers that are, where they're gone for days or weeks at a time. And that's not the case. Waste Management is a member of Women in Trucking. They will train drivers, and then they can haul trash. And we had at a convention just a couple weeks ago, we had a Waste Management truck there. It's like it's a joystick inside the truck. It's like playing a game, and you're not out there touching the trash. It's all done by, equipment, and the drivers are home every day. And we have drivers who haul intermodal they haul rail cars, to and from a facility, or even from the ports. I mean, they're home every night. So we are trying to get the word out by telling the stories of these women who are doing these jobs, and sharing them and saying, you can come into the trucking industry and you can still have a family.
Ellen, as we, head into closing out this program, I have two questions for you. One is, what do you see in the future for women in trucking? And number two is, if the women who are listening to this program want to get involved in the trucking industry or in your organization, how can they do that?
Well, first of all, it's womenintrucking.org to become a member. And for a driver, I think it's like $35 a year, and for a student, it's only $10. For an organization, obviously, it's depends on the size of the company. But I would say sign up for the mentoring program. We also have what we call the Engage platform, where it's our own social media platform inside our membership. So you have to be a member to access it. And then we're starting chapters. So you asked me what's ahead for women in trucking. We're starting chapters. The first chapter will be launching in the Pennsylvania area in February. And other groups are starting chapters so that people can be involved locally or regionally. And then we just announced our driver ambassador tractor trailer program. We have a driver who drives for Schneider 2 weeks out of the month, and then drives for us 1 week out of the month. And we have a trailer that was wrapped. It was donated by Walmart, and it's got a hands-on learning environment inside. Touch screens. It shows what kind of clothing women drivers wear, and 3 different companies that made clothing. One has steel-toed boots, the other one has jeans with lots of pockets, and the third one has safety gear, and they're all run by women. And then ATS donated a simulator. So we have a simulator in the tractor trailer, and we'll be taking that around to high schools and to non-trucking events and talking about careers in the transportation industry, and not just driving, but we have on the touch screens, it's got everything from myths about the trucking industry to dispel those myths. And can you be a good driver? Do you have it in your DNA? So lots of hands-on learning. And so we really need to get the word out that there are great careers here and that women can do the job.
Super. Well, Ellen, I want to thank you for taking your time to join us and to talk about women in trucking, and to give us some insights and information that maybe most of our listeners haven't had. So thanks again for taking your time to be with us.
Well, I appreciate it, Ron. And also, I also have a passion for TFC Global. And you know that the spiritual side of a driver's day also needs to be addressed and as well. So thank you for what you do.
You're welcome. Once again, we wanted to thank our listeners for joining our program and remind you that we can be reached at truckerslife@TNCRadio.LIVE, or if you'd like help with a struggle you're having in your life or family, or you just want to share your story with us, you can contact TFC Global at 717-426-9977, or email us at info@tfcglobal.org.
I hope you enjoyed the show. Let us hear from you. Send email to truckerslife@tncradio.live. Stay tuned.